And I wholeheartedly believe that bikes can change the world, bikes can change people, they can change cultures. And sometimes I think the industry may not always realize the power that it can have if it would just collaborate together. The industry was built in such a way that every brand is its own little kingdom, and instead of fighting against other trends like pickleball or paddle or skateboards or something else, we tend to fight with each other and so we're always looking at how do we take market share from the people who are already selling bikes, and how do we get people who already have 3 bikes to buy another bike. But really, there's so much other opportunity out there that we don't talk to, and a lot of that is because our workforce doesn't always reflect that other market opportunity or bigger market opportunities.
Welcome to another episode of A Ride to Success, the podcast that takes you on a learning journey from a productive, creative, and active life through the power of the bike. My name is Pedro Couto Lopes. I'm your host. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name. And in the podcast, I explore cycling, global trends, community needs, innovative business strategies, and the journeys of remarkable individuals in the world of cycling. Today, I am honored to have April Marshke join us. She's a true force in the cycling world. April's journey into cycling was anything but ordinary. She started her career in the golf industry, but soon pivoted after realizing how challenging it was for women to break into leadership roles. This realization led her to find a home in the cycling industry, where she spent over 13 years at Specialized Bicycle Components, working across America and Europe, and most importantly, championing growth of e-bikes. April's mission goes beyond products and trends. She's deeply committed to making the cycling industry more inclusive. As a leader in initiatives like the Summit series and their work in Women in Cycling, April is actively driving efforts to increase diversity, elevate women into leadership roles, and foster collaboration across the cycling industry. Before we get into the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, I have a huge favor to ask you. If you like what you listen, please consider giving a subscribe, a review to the podcast. It helps me to get more amazing people to talk to and share their learning journeys with you, and I'll be forever grateful. Now, back to the podcast. Welcome, April, to Ride to Success. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast.
Great, thanks for having me, Pedro.
Brilliant. You enjoy so many outdoor sports, from mountaineering to bikepacking to golfing. And I'm curious to find out, more about your journey into cycling industry. What inspired you to pursue a path in this career, in this cycling industry?
Yeah. So first, cycling found me. I didn't find it. I was living in Colorado. I was inspired by mountains. I tried to ride mountain bikes. My bike got stolen, as that happens. So I was a runner for a little while. But really, I was in Arizona playing golf, and I had a golf injury. Big thing, golf injuries. I had golfer's elbow. Like, oh my God.
That's a good
golf. I know, it's traumatic.
I've experienced the same thing, but with cycling. But yeah, terrible.
Yeah. So it doesn't sound as dramatic as a bike injury, but I couldn't play, so I wanted to get some other kinds of training. And I was living in Scottsdale. Lots of people are riding, and so I thought, hey, I'd like to try that. I was invited out on a group ride by an indoor cycling instructor. Fell in love with it, and at the time, I was working in the golf business, getting my MBA at the same time.
Okay, right.
And I kind of, in a bad way, but I found out that the golf industry wasn't as open as I thought it was. I had kind of a bad experience with kind of being able to move up in my career, and I quickly pivoted. I quit my job, and I found myself working in a bike shop while I was going to school. Thought it's great to get some discounts on nutrition while I'm riding my bike. And very quickly after that, I was very fortunate. I had kind of passively dropped some applications at Specialized, located in California. I was so lucky. 3 of their product managers walked in the door of my bike shop one day, asking questions. They were doing research, market research, and I just took it as an absolute opportunity to tell them everything I knew and tell them that I wanted to be in the bike industry. And I thought it was so cool what they did. And I was very lucky that 3 months later, I was moving to California and starting to work at Specialized. And that was the start of my 13-year journey.
Very good. Interesting.
Yeah.
I'll just give us a bit of context. What the golf industry, what barriers did you notice there? Because I think that might be interesting to find out later on, like if there's any parallels here with the cycling industry.
Yeah, it's super interesting. And I actually didn't realize that there were so many parallels between the two sports until I got into the cycling world. But I mean, it was really hard. I was working for a golf management company, so they manage golf courses around the world, and they manage luxury properties for people, but they do a great job at it. You know, it's not easy for an owner to own a property. And so when you have someone who has supply relationships, they help. And so that was great. But I realized like there's no women in leadership. There's not a lot of women who are teaching golf. There's not a lot of women that are running or managing golf courses. And so you typically have really similar things that we see in cycling, which is the Women's Wednesday League. And they all go and the women get together and they wear pink and they play golf together every Wednesday. And other than that, then they're maybe playing with their partners. And it's not as often that you see groups of women playing golf together. There's also the product differentiation. Why is women's product different from men's product? Is it sad or is it, should men not want to use women's product? And there was a lot of crossovers that, and then the distribution network is also very similar where independent bike retailers are very similar to independent golf shops. And then you have like big chains outside of that, and the importance of fit in your performance, how to maximize your performance through fit of your golf clubs and all of your material, as well as with the bike. And I always say that there's a reason why golf balls and tires are often made by the same people, like Michelin or Bridgestone. They have a lot of inside materials that are the same. And they're also generally underlooked by a lot of players or riders as well.
You mean, and I'm just, okay, you're like...
Golf balls are made of rubber inside. They're like a bunch of rubber bands. So it's the same.
I didn't know that. We learn something new every day. Brilliant. I didn't know that. But then again, I'm not into golfing, so it's probably something that would have not... it would have just like gone over my head. Okay. Interesting. That's interesting that you just kind of created these parallels, which is unfortunate. But it seems to be where things are at the moment. Okay, so you got a job at Specialized, and you suddenly find yourself with kind of your dream job. And, you have been working there for 12 years, over 12 years, in the retail space. And I'm kind of interested to find out, how has this experience working with Specialized since 2012 has kind of shaped your vision and your experience of the cycling industry? Because it's quite a long time to be working in the cycling industry. And I'm just interested from a curiosity standpoint.
Yeah. So the first thing, I would say my first 2 years at Specialized was really focused on events and going out and meeting riders. And so I think for me, what I take away from the industry and the product that they make is that bikes can really change lives. And I wholeheartedly believe that bikes can change the world, bikes can change people, they can change cultures. And so I believe they're just such a tool. And sometimes I think the industry may not always realize the power that it can have if it would just collaborate together. The industry was built in such a way that every brand is its own little kingdom. And instead of fighting against other trends like pickleball or paddle or skateboards or something else, we tend to fight with each other. And so we're always looking at how do we take market share from the people who are already selling bikes, and how do we get people who already have 3 bikes to buy another bike? But really, there's so much other opportunity out there that we don't talk to. And a lot of that is because our workforce doesn't always reflect that other market opportunity or bigger market opportunities. And so it's not that the product isn't right. It's sometimes that we don't know how to speak to them, or we're just not reaching that area yet.
Okay.
And the other side of that is, there's going to be a natural barrier. And that natural barrier is that people don't feel safe riding bikes. There are many people that just, that scares them. And until they have a dedicated bike lane or they have gravel paths in their area where they are completely off the road, they are not going to ride a bike. And so
for sure,
through market collaboration, that's the only way we will actually be strong enough to lobby against the automakers and to lobby for safer streets and to lobby for more space for people. And I think that's the collective power of the industry that we just haven't yet harnessed, but I'm hopeful for the future. I think there's regulations coming that will force the industry to collaborate, and that could be a new day for us.
What you touched upon, it's very critical. Collaborating within the industry, lobbying for better infrastructure so that people can feel safe riding their bikes, getting more people to ride bikes. It's critical for the growth of the industry. And there is as well an aspect that you have been an active champion, which is to promote active mobility through e-bikes. Was there at some point through your journey at Specialized, was there a point where you realized this is where kind of the next growth phase of cycling will be, or what you saw it as a opportunity to the market to evolve? What was the process of that, and was there a conscious effort for you to move to the e-bike active mobility space?
Yeah. So Specialized, I was there right when Specialized did launch their very first e-bike, which was an active mobility bike. It went great in Europe. It was definitely more European focused. The US took some time to understand. I remember I was part of the business development team, which was a lot of for this bike. We had to convince retailers to take it in. We had to, the certification alone between every state, that was also really hard at the time. You know, the U.S. didn't really understand how to regulate these things on a state-by-state case. But for me, I think one of the biggest things was I moved to Europe. I moved to the Netherlands in 2014. And that was around the time when I started to really see and understand what a culture that relied on bikes for transportation really looks like. What does that mean? And when you take an aging population, which is happening in Europe, it's happening also in the United States, but in Europe in particular, you have an aging population that grew up using bike as their mainstay for mobility, and now they need help. And so it makes just 100% sense that of course you'd put a battery on this thing. Of course you're going to help people. And of course older people use it first. But I think the greatest thing that I've started to see, and that happened really, I think, in 2015, with the first Levo launch from Specialized, and then really e-mountain bikes becoming much more innovative. So it's almost like a lot of brands went and said, okay, we're not going to focus on active mobility because the German manufacturers have that under control. The Dutch manufacturers have that under control. That is like, we call it Red Sea, right? Like you're not going to make any differentiation in that market. We're going to need more time there. But the growth market, and it has been for the past several years, is on e-mountain bikes and getting those riders on board. The biggest change that I've seen over the past 8 years in particular has been perception. Like e-mountain biking has made e-bikes not for old people anymore. And that took a long time. Now, I would say different markets are in different levels of that adoption phase. I would say the United States maybe lags a little bit in that respect. There's a lot of holdouts there, which is completely fine. It's all about your intention. And I think there's people who maybe one day will have an e-bike and a normal bike if they're privileged enough to have two bikes in their it's about what do you want out of that ride at the moment. Some people really want to get training, and some people need joy. Some people just ride for joy, and that is okay because that's helping mental health in a way that I think we have not even been able to quantify just yet.
I mean, first of all, the joy, the bringing of joy through e-biking, and that is very powerful as a message, as a way to communicate to the end consumer. And how do you see the brands communicating that? Because coming from my side, I see there is a certain stigma attached to e-bicycles. And as how do you see the role of brands in educating that factor, the joy that e-biking brings, the freedom that it gives you? Has this been done effectively with, for instance, with the growth of e-mountain biking? Has it been done effectively, or is there things that you have noticed through your experience that are still not done well?
Yeah, I think it's really hard. Well, I think the product lines have become difficult for riders to understand. Why do we need super light?
Yeah.
Like what is the lightweight going to do for me? Why is that better? Which one do I want? And so I think the more differentiation that gets put into the market, the harder it is for riders to understand.
Yeah.
First, I'll touch on the technical marketing of how hard it is to explain watt hours, torque, power, and battery efficiency, because not all batteries are created equal. And so, and then there's heat transfer. Oh, we're losing heat, and so you're going to expend more energy, and your battery's not going to last as long, and then your range is less. But all of that is not something a rider wants to hear. So I think that is a place where the industry is still seeking to understand how do we do that really effectively in a way that inspires the rider and doesn't intimidate them. We can talk a little bit later about the battery passport, which I think will help. It's a regulation coming that I think will help this issue. But in terms of, I think, making e-bikes accessible and making them something that people, e-mountain bikes in particular, are excited to ride, I think brands have done a really great job. I think Trek was very clever. They had, I forgot which bike they were launching, the one with the latest TQ motor, but they were like had a rider like running up a hill with a hand behind the guy's back, like as he was going up, to kind of understand, like, that's kind of the feeling that you get when you're riding this bike.
Yeah,
And I
I
think
remember
that
that
was
one.
yeah, that was super clever. I thought that was great. And I think Specialized does a great job of just being kind of silly and out there and like, hey, stop, don't talk about the specs so much. It's about the feel. Don't worry about it. Like your batteries, everything's going to last as long as you need it to as long as you want it to go. So I think there's a lot there. I think what we have to train riders on is understanding that it's more than just numbers. Don't break out an Excel spreadsheet and only go by numbers. That's not the only way you should purchase your bike. Go and ride it, because fit. Every brand has a different ethos on how they design their bikes and what their geometries are and how they integrate batteries and motors into that. And that's going to affect your ride. And so maybe what your buddy rides isn't right for you because they're very, very tall and maybe a bigger build. And maybe you're very small and very light, and you could ride a totally different bike, but have the same experience. So I think that the test ride is the most important thing. And I think the other thing that we are up against with e-mountain bikes and perception, it's a very fine line, but I've had a lot of trail advocates come up to me at conferences and tell me, hey, we have to work on the mountain bike marketing, because every time I go and advocate for new trails, the hikers or the government's telling me, look at these images of people with the spraying dirt up. That's not good for the trail, and mountain biking is ruining the trail, and e-bikes in particular, they're too heavy and there's too many people now riding. And I think that's something we really have to understand is we brought a lot of new people into the forest, but we did not increase the capacity of those forests with new trails. And it's very similar to building mobility infrastructure in cities. We still need to have recreation and trail infrastructure in forests, and also just outside of cities in parks, connecting cities to forests, so that we call them peri-urban trails. I have to say, IMBA Europe did a great job of telling me, educating me on what the proper name for those trails were. But it's just been such an education over the past couple of years, being very close with IMBA Europe and the work that they're doing, and really understanding how e-bikes and trail advocacy are in some ways having some friction and in some ways having some really great wins. So.
Very good. I mean, and building on that, actually, I'm curious. I mean, so you worked actively within the e-mountain biking space. But has there been any exciting trends that you have seen currently shaping the global cycling industry? I mean, you might already have touched on this, but I'm just curious to find out if there's something else that is exciting you right now about the currently cycling industry at the moment.
Yeah. So I will say I've never been a product futurist. I am always, for 13 years, I was always in awe of everything that our product teams at Specialized were putting out there, where their brains were going. They always thought very differently from me. So in terms of rider trends, I usually tend to see things that are bigger, but not as maybe a little less cool. So one, I think that bike packing over the past 3 years, definitely over the past 5 years, has become more and more mainstream. Now, mainstream in comparison to what? Yes, it is not like road riding by any means. There's going to be big leaps in terms of motor and battery performance on the e-bike side. That we can always expect that. I think the thing I'm most excited about is that access is becoming better through smarter business models. So what I mean by that is we're seeing brands partner with financing. We're seeing brands partner with leasing models.
Yeah.
We're seeing them partner with insurers. They're becoming more and more sophisticated, more like the auto industry, which I don't love the auto industry. However, they're already leading in mobility. We can learn a thing or two of how they're breaking down barriers to take something expensive, still be profitable, and make it available to many people. And what we've seen, particularly through COVID, is the bike industry has been working on razor thin margins because people can't necessarily afford bikes, but we want them to have bikes. And so too many parts of the supply chain have not always had enough cash because we've not actually charged the real value of a bike. But that's because if you charged what you really needed to charge to run your business well, you would probably not have very many sold, which is also a great business model, but not typically the one that cycling industry has taken.
Interesting.
It's always been about volume, not about exclusivity. And so what I think is that as we start to see more technology built into the bikes that allows for tracking, that allows for understanding where the bike has been, how many kilometers does it have on the tires, what's been done to the motor, how many cycles of the battery, et cetera, et cetera. When we get to know the bike better, it's similar to a VIN number of a car.
Yeah.
You can start to have more clarity and more transparency in secondhand pricing, secondhand markets. And then that becomes also a profitable business model. So you don't want a secondhand market that's not profitable either. And so I believe that we start to see these business models that begin to change and begin to allow more riders to come into the market.
Yeah, that's such a good point about breaking barriers and making it more accessible to a wider audience through different incentives, through financing. I mean, you mentioned the VIN number of cars. That's a great way to identify a car, check the history. And to my knowledge, that's not something that is quite yet done in the cycling industry, but I'm here to be proven wrong if I'm mistaken. I think there is, looking at especially at the e-bikes, you see a lot of already big players coming from the auto industry, from technology space, coming into the e-biking space and starting to developing their own products. And that's an interesting play where you have companies with more resources than the cycling industry coming to introduce their own products. And you have experience and expertise in this field. And this probably is a great for the consumer because there's more competition, there's more offer, there is more value to be obtained from the consumer perspective. But what does it represent for the cycling industry? When you have automakers coming to the space, developing their own e-bicycles, technology companies that have nothing to do even with autos or with cycling and just coming into the space because they have the engineers, they can easily adapt that technology to bring into the e-biking space. What does it represent to the cycling industry, in your opinion?
A really fun challenge. So I am so biased because I've never really worked in automotive, but I do come from Michigan, which is like automotive capital of the United States. Neither here nor there. But so I think that there is something so unique about the way that a bike rides, that when you take something from an auto manufacturer, they could potentially overcomplicate the way that they make the product. So what I know about automotive from a lot of people who have worked in automotive and then come to cycling is that they are so bound by a lot of processes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of extra regulation, a lot of extra things that they do because of auto regulations that maybe they just apply to their business because, hey, that's just how we do it for everything.
Yeah.
And things could take longer.
Mm.
What always has struck me is, why haven't we seen more from the auto industry yet? They should be like pumping these things out. And yet the cycling industry is, even though sometimes we're chaotic or maybe we think that we're moving too slow, I think we're more faster and we're more nimble. And we're also much closer to the customer.
Yeah.
The knowledge that our industry collectively has, because we typically just trade employees around from brand to brand. Not a lot of people leave and not a lot of people come in from fresh places. But because there's also all that shared knowledge, I think there's a lot of opportunity to just be faster than the auto industry. However, it is an absolute threat. It's fantastic that we actually have that threat, but I really believe that the cycling industry has the knowledge and the vision of what they believe riders want for the future. Now, that is very different than being an active mobility company.
Yeah.
Now, a three-wheeled thing with a shell over it is not necessarily something that the bike industry may make. There might be a brand that does it, but I wouldn't consider that. That's where we start to think about, like, well, what is active mobility really? Does it, yeah, is there something, there's these vehicles that are kind of like in between cars and bikes that sometimes look like a cargo bike, but aren't really a cargo bike. And there's a lot of these like middle in between things that I think the auto industry might be better suited to go after, but maybe not a two-wheeled fun machine.
I mean, you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about one of the downfalls of the cycling industry is not working more together, we're sharing that knowledge. And you just said that that's one of the key benefits that we have is exchanging people from. There's a lot of crossover, people moving from brand to brand. So what leads these to think is that there is here kind of an opportunity for cycling brands to really go after a wider audience. And like, but the question is, how do they do this without neglecting or their core audience? Because that's where they have kind of developed their products, their brand communications, the value of the brand around this core group of people that really enjoy the bikes for leisure, for sport. So how do you combine forces to go after the kind of the space outside of that, outside of leisure?
Yeah. So I would say for me, there will be specialists in the space. So there may be brands that focus more on riders who just need a bike.
Yeah.
And that is absolutely one way to go. But outside of growing the pie in terms of, I would say that's price points, right? So how do we get all price points to attract a wider audience of people through different economic or socio-economic backgrounds? Perfect. Those are, I believe, just very different business models. And how are you going to, where do you want to target? Which business models do you want to target? But what I think a problem is to be really honest, like, first, 50% of the population is women, and our cycling workforce does not represent that in key areas. There are absolutely parts of the business where there may be more women. However, when it comes to developing, typically in product development, engineering, more of the tech side, we are lagging. However, I think it's not for anyone that doesn't want to. It's not anyone's fault necessarily. We all have unconscious bias, and it's something that I genuinely believe the industry wants to address.
Yeah.
Why do they want to address it? Because it's a massive market opportunity. every couple of years you'll see an article come by that says, hey, don't forget women have all the spending power. Like, it's just a thing that we have. However, I think there's such opportunities for us to diversify our workforce and come up with collaborative efforts. So I was speaking with SRAM. SRAM is fantastic at this, and no brand does it perfectly. So I don't want to call anybody out. But SRAM, in their engineering department in the United States, it's 50% men and women in an engineering department. Wow. And I was speaking with I forgot her title, but her name is Angela, and I think she's like the head of DEI for them. And she said that was very intentional. They partnered with schools in the area that were engineering schools, with organizations that are helping to mentor women in the engineering field. And so it was really just about showing them, hey, we're a brand, we do bikes, and we need engineers. Does that sound good to you? It was really like creating that funnel approach. And she's more than open to saying, hey, why can't we get more brands doing this type of work? And so actually that's something that we're working on through an event that I'm hosting in Paris at the end of March. And that's one of the topics will be, how do we get that funnel to actually happen? How can all of the brands work together? Is it paying to come into some sort of membership group and let people know that we're there? Is it working with recruiters to guide them of, these are the new target areas? But it starts very young. So there's also a gap in the cycling journey between girls and boys, and also just sports in general. Boys tend to keep their sporting habits through puberty and through university, and girls tend to stop them. So once they get into university and have to start making choices around their career, their sport might not actually be in their mind anymore. And so if you've been cycling for 15 years already as a kid and you're now going to enter into the workforce, a cool place that you might think to work is a bike shop. And that could lead you to a brand. But if it's a place that a woman's never going into when she's young and she's just not thinking of her sports as being a career opportunity, then we also lose them from that, which is sad.
Yeah, I mean, that's really hits the nail on the head. It is, that being more inclusive, it plays a significant role in growing the sport, in growing the industry, and it's critical. You touch upon the event that you're organizing in the end of March, and since you mentioned, I want to go there now because I read what you wrote on the events page, and and this summarizes exactly what you just said. You gave a prompt to ChatGPT asking, give me an image of people riding bikes. And it was a very kind of bland image of white man, white woman. And then you asked a prompt for people working in the cycling industry or working in a bike shop. And it was just man, there was no woman at all. So, I mean, that's speaking to the bias of the AI technology, but it's also speaking to the current situation that we face in the cycling industry at the moment and in the sport in general. I mean, speaking to the statistic of girls dropping sport in school, that is the same is present here as well in UK, where a lot of girls, teenagers drop. They don't want to do sport when I don't know exactly the age, but there's a significant drop comparatively to boys. So I wanted to kind of understand this from, you launched the, Summit series, which is the event, the name of the event. And what is kind of the goals behind this? Because there is, you touched already a little bit about this, about what is the opportunity for growth in the cycling industry. But what do you want to achieve with this event?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm really glad you giving me the platform to talk about it. So I believe wholeheartedly that every brand in the bike industry wants to do the right thing. I think that they genuinely try to find, try to get candidates. They try to attract what they can. And I think that we are not sharing best practices. So when I look at our industry groups, like Cycling Industries Europe or People for Bikes, they have a lot on their plate to do already. There's a lot of lobby work to be done. There's a lot of making sure that e-bikes can still keep riding and all of the other things that these industry groups are working towards. However, we also need to support the idea of how can we help our industry build the correct tools. And so I've partnered with Industries Europe. They have an expert group within their organization called Women in Cycling. And this is a group of women and men that are members of CIE that are invested in this topic. And so I partnered with them, and we really said we want to do an in-person meeting. We need to give the industry tools to do this. And so this event, the main goal is to understand, what are you currently doing? Let's learn from other people. And what are the tools that you need to get there? So that then the industry groups have something to actually work with, because it's very hard to get this information, and it's better to do it in the form of a conversation rather than here's a survey and then we're going to have to try and follow up with you later. So we want to bring CIE members and non-members together. We want to hear from experts as well. So we've got some people coming in to show what they've done in the space of either gender equity or diversity. And then we'll have SRAM. They're going to bring some of their engineers. We're going to talk a little bit to them about how has that process been for them. And then we'll also talk about the cycling culture. Yeah. Which is when does it help us? When is it absolutely amazing at helping us retain and recruit women into the cycling industry? And when is it sometimes harmful? And can we open that box up? Because I think for those that are really into cycling, the culture can be great. Yeah. Those that are maybe into cycling, but then you stay with the brand a couple years, and then maybe you get into running, and then maybe you're a little different all of a sudden, or it just depends. It just depends on the culture. Every brand is different. I would also say every department and every brand is different, but it's just breaking open that bias and like talking about it, and to really talking about our cycling culture and saying what's great about it and what might we need to adapt to in order to be the industry that we want to be. So is it understanding what's going on in the top level within on like advocacy, organizational level, brand level, and really change from the top down. So, this might be kind of a tangent, but I think that it's now more important than ever because, for instance, you have in the US the new elected president not decommissioning, this might be the wrong word, but taking down the DEI initiatives as not relevant. Or maybe I'm phrasing this incorrectly, but saying it's not relevant now. And I see this kind of a more of a pivotal moment for any industry, but we're talking about the cycling industry now. Because you seem to be on a mission to inspire more people to have active lifestyles and to kind of be more healthier. And as part of that, women are critical to that. What do you think needs to happen at leadership level for these to cascade down to girls looking up to athletes, to seeing the bike as something that they can gain joy from? Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I won't touch on anything that's happening in American politics. However, I would say that we don't want to just have a number. It's not enough just to have, hey, we have to hit 25%. I think that will not encourage lasting change. And it also may put women in roles that they shouldn't be in or they're not ready for, and they're not being set up for success. Okay. So I firmly believe in this is like, my dream. So go for it. Over the next 5 to 10 years, there will be a lot of men that have been in the industry for 20 or 30 years retiring. That is just a fact. Succession planning is happening and it's important. what I think needs to happen more than ever, and I think there's really great programs happening right now, particularly with Shift Active Media. Rachel Burnside has done an incredible job with the program called Uplift, and that's a mentoring program. But we need to skill up and prepare the women that are currently in the industry to take those leadership positions when they get ready.
Yeah.
So when they become available, these women need to be able to step into those roles confidently and not have an imposter syndrome that they don't deserve to be there. Because it's not just that they might feel that they don't deserve to be there, but it could be that they get kicked into a role because, yeah, we need a woman and she's here, so put her there, but then isn't supported. Or maybe she doesn't feel like she can reach out to people or doesn't have the network to go reach out so that she can be successful. And so I firmly believe that over the next couple of years, it's more about upskilling and getting these women prepared and keeping them in the industry as long as we can so that when the leadership roles become available, they are thought of and they are real contenders for those positions. And I think that will make a big change. I'm super encouraged by what I see in professional athletics. I think Nike stepping in and sponsoring Demi, for good or bad, with whatever you think about Nike, it's a great visibility, it's great representation, and we need to elevate athletes like that. I think that team in general, SD Works, used to be Bulls Domans. They've always done a really great job of trying to give women more and more or pay their athletes a fair wage so that they don't have to have a separate job. So I think there's teams out there that are really representing well, and more we need that to happen. And I think, the more events that we have, I think it's fantastic what Zwift has done with Tour de Femmes. Yeah, there's a lot of great things happening to get athlete visibility, which I think, to your point, will help with younger generations of girls seeing that and being inspired by it. Absolutely. Then we just have to have the workforce to back it up.
Yeah, very good. Exactly. I wanted to build on what you just said. You are in a position as a leader, as a mentor, and I think perhaps it's critical for people to hear what advice would you give to young professionals, entrepreneurs looking to make an impact in the cycling industry? Where do you see women and men?
I would say know who you want to go after, because cycling is so varied and you can take so many different perspectives with it. And you have to be very intentional with which part of the sector do you really want to go after? Do you want to go after race and performance? Do you want to go after urban and mobility? Or do you want to go after adventure? And I think those are three really different rider mindsets. So if you're coming with a product, that's kind of like, be really clear, because I've seen a lot of kind of ho-hum, wishy-washy products of like, it can do it all. And it never really serves anyone that well. And then the other thing, just more generally, if you're new to the industry, find a networking group. Whether you're a man or a woman, you got to find something and go outside of your brand. That was probably over the last 5 years, I made concentrated efforts to try and learn what other brands were doing and more about the industry as a whole and not just what Specialized was doing.
Yeah.
And a lot of product people might know each other, but when I started to meet people from Cycling Industries Europe and all of these advocacy groups that were doing work so that I could sell bikes, which is like such an honor to meet these people, because they're like, really, they have to wear suits all day. Like, it's horrible. They don't get to go for lunch rides all the time and, travel with their bikes. Like, they're sitting in Brussels in bad weather and, they're really doing hard work. And when I got to really meet them, I was just so thankful for the work that they had done, but it also gave me a lot of perspective around what is our industry, and also who do bike brands not even consider as the industry, where someone working, this is something that really last summer was like a huge learning for me. I went to a trade show called Velo City.
Yeah.
And it's basically where cities all go. Like, the cities are there, bike share is there. It's all about urban mobility. And it's about getting your governmental officials there to talk about these big issues and who's solving them and how can we solve them together. It's very collaborative. It's like the UN for bikes. It's so cool. And like you go there and you're so inspired because these people are talking about like, give us the street back. It's a revolution. We need the streets back for the people. And then 2 weeks later, I go to Eurobike and I was pretty uninspired because it felt very the same. It felt very product focused, not consumer focused. It felt very kind of bro-y in a lot of ways. There were moments where I didn't even feel included, where I felt like that I don't feel comfortable here, which was kind of a strange thing considering like I feel like I can walk anywhere with bikes. So that was a weird feeling for me. But I do think that that Eurobike is going in a really great direction. The organizers are really relooking at the content. They're trying to get more conversations happening around industry collaboration. Yeah. They've had diversity conversations. So they are trying to educate, but no one sits in the audience. It's like they have these great discussions and then the audience is empty. So I think there's an opportunity for us we got to figure out a way to encourage the industry to like sit down, which I think a lot of us are a little hyper. It's hard for us to just sit still and listen, but maybe we could get them to sit still for a little while on some of these harder topics to discuss.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I guess it comes back to the topic of collaboration rather than butting heads with each other, finding a common ground and looking at what can be done to get more people into the sport, what can be done to bring more women into the sport, into the industry, more inclusivity, diversity. So that's critical for the growth of sport, of the industry as well. It's interesting about what you mentioned about Eurobike. I've spoken to other podcast guests and they're women going to Eurobike. The experience is not too dissimilar to what to would kind of that atmosphere. There's a considerable change in the group discussions, in having more panels to talk about diversity, inclusivity, and collaboration. But it does still that feeling is still remains. Do you think COVID was perhaps a moment that represented a missed opportunity to change this? Because it's a massive change in how cycling industry operated. And was it a missed opportunity for the cycling industry to address these changes, or was it not even in their radar?
So it's interesting. I felt like during COVID, before the bust, so still in that boom period of like 2021, that's when companies really started to dig in. Like, right. I was so proud of how much conversations there were surveys. Like, a lot of companies were doing internal surveys. I think around that moment, Trek had also put out its first sustainability report. Mm-hmm, so we started seeing brands actually really put some things out. What I'm concerned about is the moment right now that we are in. Those conversations have stopped. Not stopped completely, but it's harder to put that money. It's harder to take that cash and put it towards this right now. Or when you're looking to reduce your workforce, it goes back to merit. We have to take only the best. Like, we've got to reduce the workforce. And my fear is that we're going to relook at this in 18 months when, hopefully inventories are cleared and maybe balance sheets are a little more balanced. And it's starting from square one again because maybe a lot of the women left. Maybe a lot of the diversity just kind of thought, this is not, the culture's bad, because also during these hard periods, it's not always a nice place to be when your company is suffering. It can be hard to keep your culture in a great, happy place. Like, you're not having, bagels every Friday, you're going to cut the bagel budget. There's small things that get cut. Yeah. You have to, cut the chocolate budget. No, we don't have chocolate at reception anymore. Had to kill it. There's these small things that you don't think they're really part of the culture, but when employees see that happen, it's like, oh, this is getting a little ridiculous with these cuts. So I think that's a little bit my fear is that we're going to be starting, or we've been going backwards during these moments, which is, I've seen it with even trying to get some sponsorship for the event, Summit Series. It's been very difficult because it's just not, it's a no. it's not even a maybe. SRAM, thank God, like they're so invested in this topic. They did come through, but it's very interesting to me right now that it's not something that a lot of women that I've asked, hey, would you attend? They've even said, ooh, I'm a little concerned to even ask to travel right now.
Right.
Which is like, oh, that is so heartbreaking, because these are also, the target audience for the event is men and women that are in people and culture or human resources. They're not going to Eurobike. They don't go to Velocity. Like, these are not places, these are not industry events that they get to go. So their connection with what the industry looks like, or other people, or how other brands are doing it, it can be very insulated. And so this is also an opportunity for them to kind of break out and learn something new. And it's a really hard thing to allow budget to give budget to, I think, at this moment, which is disheartening.
Yeah, especially after COVID, after the whiplash, after the boom, this is the economy, it's just constricting. So budgets get cut. Small things like that just make a huge impact. It's unfortunate, but at the same time, it's very important, because in moments of crisis, like moments of economical downturn, that's also where brands need to look at how to grow, how to develop, because inevitably the best brands will come out on top of it. The cream goes to the top, as the saying goes.
Absolutely.
What is, for you, looking ahead, what are your predictions in regards to the future of cycling, both as a mode of transportation, both as a lifestyle choice? Where do you see the industry going?
Yeah, I'll say where I want it to go.
Yeah, sure.
If it all happens the way it's planned to happen, where I hope it goes in the future is, so I think it starts with evolution of cities. And I do firmly believe that the European Union in particular has done a lot of really great work with investing and creating the European Cycling Declaration. So money will be flowing to creating that investment, more riders, more safe streets, people walking. And I think that will have a very organic effect on the capacity, as we talked about. So capacity will be there. Barriers will be lowered. And so then it's really the industry's job to ensure that the barrier to entry in terms of finance, price point, quality, and I would say also theft. That's also one we have to really consider. How do we reduce theft? And I think all of those will be addressed in the near future. By 2030, I think that we'll see a different look of our cities in many ways. And I do think we will continue to see more and more bikes and people parking the car and using their bike. That said, it is dependent on how work changes. I think, do people have to go to offices? Are they still allowed to do some remote days? And will people choose to live closer to their places of work so they can commute by bike? I don't think I'm not answering your question. I'm just making a dream vision of what cycling in cities look like. But I think if the industry responds to those positive factors and the regulations work the way they should work, the industry will see growth, particularly in active mobility and price points, or I would say there will be higher value bikes will also be sold more in the future. Because of, like I said, because of leasing, because of secondhand availability, we'll have that secondhand market. And I would say that the opportunity for retailers to have really great service revenues will be great in the future. I think that will also be a flip. We'll be more service providers than we will bike sellers, which will be great, because if we don't need more bikes than people, but if everyone could have at least one, that would be great.
I mean, that's the vision. That's the vision that you need to have, that more people need to have, because it gives you something to look for, to work towards, and you start implementing steps to get there.
Yeah. I forgot one thing that's very important.
Yeah.
Digitalization. So we will have a digital freaking supply chain, whether we like it or not, by 2030. It will be transparent. It will be in a passport for batteries. And my vision and my goal would be that we actually have what's called a bike passport by 2030 as well. So it's not just your battery that's traceable, but the entire bike has a product passport. So you know everything about that bike when you purchase it. whether you buy it secondhand from a friend or whatever it is, that passport goes with it, and we start really digitalizing our industry.
Very good. So sharing your predictions, I'm just curious to find out if there is someone that inspires you the most right now in the cycling world that is making great work.
Yeah. To say there's a lot of women in the Women in Cycling group that I work with, and I just find it incredible. And I will name drop a few women that I've come across over the past couple of years that I just think are doing incredible work. So Isabel Eberlin from Women in Cycling Germany, she's also the general manager of Velo Concept, which is part of the management team for Eurobike.
Yeah.
She's exceptional. What she's doing in Germany and what she's built in Germany with her, there's like 5 other women that I think she's working with on building that network in Germany. It's really incredible because it's such an important market, and what goes well there can go well in other places also. Yeah, that's super inspirational. I also think that I would have to say Komoot in general, just like that brand is doing really great for driving community and breaking down what cycling looks like. They're kind of like not necessarily the anti-Strava, but they serve a very different target audience, and they're doing it very elegantly. So I think Komoot is doing a really great job there. Kate Veronell from Zwift, I think everything that she, the sponsorship opportunities that she's putting forward, again, Zwift is really doing great things with developing women in their programs. And then everyone who's IMBA Europe, IMBA USA, People for Bikes, CIE, all of those organizations that really do the groundwork for us.
Yeah.
Just incredible.
Very good. Thanks for sharing. I mean, I've been lucky enough to interview Isabel Eberlin and Kate Verno. So yeah, it's I completely recognize the value that they bring to the cycling industry. I just wanted to make a quick break. If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow the podcast, and share it with your network. It's so important to bring you more amazing guests. Now, back to the podcast. It comes to the point in the podcast where every guest is asked the same question, and on a personal touch. What does success look like to you?
Yeah, success to me is feeling balanced with work and life. And I think when you work in the cycling industry, that is a really fuzzy line. It's a really hard line to follow your passion and to not let it also eat your soul. And I think when you can really wake up in the morning and be excited to do your work, but also excited to do your hobby and feel very balanced in that, then I think you are absolutely a success.
Very good. It's I've heard many times where people working in the cycling industry, they say the longer I work in the cycling industry, the less time I have to ride my bike. And to your point, it's finding that balance, finding that fine balance where your hobby, your passion doesn't hit you up and spit you out. So it's a tricky one, but it's a great way of balancing your mental health, the joy that you get from riding bikes, and still contributing and adding value to the cycling industry. So I wanted to kind of now move on to a tradition that I started on the podcast, which every guest leaves a question to my next guest, not knowing who they are. And so the question that was left for you is the following. If you could organize a bike event, where would it be and why would you organize it?
Man, that's so hard not to put my own. It's like, do I look at it from like a business perspective where people will actually go, or a selfish perspective? Okay, so I think I'm going to say the Carpathian Mountains in Poland.
Right.
Because it is not a place people often think to go of. And yet I have done 2 or 3 different bikepacking races throughout Poland, and I have been absolutely blown away by the trails there, and also the gravel roads. So I think putting a bike event there would be really interesting. There's a couple already, but yeah, that would be where I would put one.
Yeah, very good.
To show people a really different place. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I haven't heard of it, and so I'll definitely check it out. I mean, that's actually something that's a huge part of you, of your interest, bikepacking. It's something that we haven't touched, but I wanted just to open a little bit now, actually, because I think it does reveal a little bit more about you as a person. And you mentioned as well bikepacking earlier on in the conversation about you seeing a huge growth. Yeah, and I've noticed that as well. Not in a kind of in a mainstream effect of other disciplines in cycling, but is growing steadily. What does it represent for you? This might be like a very simplistic question, but what do you get out of it?
I love to suffer. So that I am, we have a phrase called a glutton for punishment. And I think for me, bikepacking is, I mean, because I enjoy it on a personal perspective, like going out for a weekend, but I love racing long distance and pushing myself as far as I can. But I also really love that that's how I get to see Europe. Being an American living here, like I don't like city trips. It's not my thing. And I just prefer to explore places on my bike. And so signing up for these races, usually the race organizers, they think so much about this track. And it's like, yeah, all 1,400 kilometers of it, they know it, they love it, they purpose built places. They want you to see specific things or experience specific things. I think that's like the best thing you could possibly do as a tourist. It's like have someone build you a great route, suffer through it a little bit, but eat, and you eat as much food as you want. You stop all the time. You're always like talking to people. You might have to ask people for help, like, you know, that you don't know, or you're trying to communicate at a bike shop. So I think you get to see the best of nature and also like the best of humanity. Because people are so kind to you. They're always giving you strange looks like, wow, where have you been? It looks like you haven't showered in days. You're like, yeah, I haven't. But you're just like, yeah, they're so curious about you. And I just find that to be so cool when you're traveling by bike and get to experience these people.
Yeah, I'm going to butcher this, but there is a saying that the best way to travel to discover a country is by bike, because you get to experience the gradients, the nature, the people, and you really get the feeling for the land. And you touch as well about the people. There's a kindness that I guess people recognize from seeing you traveling through their country. And I think people are naturally curious, so they want to learn more about why you're doing it and find out more about you personally. Mm-hmm. Is there, just going now on this, is there any particular bikepacking race or adventure that you've been on that has stuck in your mind as kind of an extraordinary experience so far?
So I think it's just because it's my favorite. I absolutely fell in love with this region. And this race really crosses through what I think are some of the best gravel riding in all of Europe, which is Badlands. So I know it's already popular enough. It doesn't need any more advertising, but if you look at the track, you can, I mean, just Andalusia in general is one of the most beautiful places in Europe, and the riding is top. So going there, experiencing the Tabernas Desert, and that is a special little place in a weird little town, and it's awesome in every way. And I think going through those different places, yeah, that's just such a special landscape that I think a lot of people should try and experience if they can.
Very good. So, April, now is your turn to leave a question to my next guest. What question would you like to leave?
My question is, what will you do to make the cycling industry better? A better place to work?
Very good. Very good. Such an important question. It's a question that you can have days on days talking about. These questions kind of reveal a little bit more about the person, reveal more about their purpose. And I think this is what is great. And, you ask anyone this question and they will immediately start reflecting on their experience, reflecting on the cycling industry at large, really starting questioning, okay, what is happening right now and what have I done to make it better, or what haven't done? So it's such a great question. So thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
And it's been a pleasure to get to know you, to have this conversation and really understand about your motivations and the purpose that you have. Where can people learn more about the Summit series if they are interested in finding more about it?
Yeah, if you're interested in the retention and recruitment of women into the cycling industry, the event is called Summit Series by Women in Cycling, and you can find us at www.summitseriesevent.com.
Brilliant. With that, thank you, April.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. My name is Pedro Couto Lopes. You can find me on LinkedIn under my own name. If you want to learn more about April or the Summit Series, be sure to visit www.summitseriesevent.com. And as April reminded us, the question we all need to ask ourselves is, what will you do to make the cycling industry a better place to work? Until next time, keep pedaling forward, stay curious, and chase your own success story. See you on the next episode. I just wanted to make a quick break. If you're enjoying this conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, follow the podcast, and share it with your network. It's so important to bring you more amazing guests. Now back to the podcast.